When the facts bend reality, this is beyond plausible.
16 years. That's how long the man who raised my daughter lived in our home, ate at our table, tucked her into bed. Last night, he was back in our kitchen, his hands holding mine, cold, damp, and smelling faintly of wet earth and something metallic. The air grew heavy with the scent of ozone, like the moment before a storm breaks, and the only sound was the slow drip of a leaky faucet echoing through the empty house. His eyes, once warm and familiar, were hollow, fixed on something just over my shoulder, something I couldn't see. My breath hitched, trapped in my throat, as a primal dread took hold, the kind that freezes your muscles and whispers that you're not alone in the dark. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, a ghost in the place he once called home. His presence a sticky, suffocating weight in the room, and in that moment, I realized he wasn't here to visit. He was here to show me something buried deep in the past, waiting to claw its way out. The man who raised my daughter is gone, but whatever brought him back is just getting started. His eyes held mine with the same intensity as our wedding day. Then, with a calm that froze the air, he spoke. A faint, metallic scent of iron seemed to seep into the room as he confessed. "I didn't kill her," he whispered, the words hanging in the damp stillness. "My brother did." Our story wasn't supposed to be a headline. It was meant to be ordinary. The quiet rhythm of a life built on trust. The scent of pine and pancakes, the sound of Lily's laughter on the swing. These were the anchors of our world. But beneath that surface, a chilling truth waited, patient and unseen. It was supposed to be ordinary, good, even. I'm Sarah. My husband David and I built a life here in Cedar Ridge. He was a quiet man, a structural engineer who found solace in the measurable, the calculable, the reliably solid. For him, the world was a series of equations to be solved, of forces to be balanced, our anchor in every storm. And Lily, our daughter, she was the one variable his formulas could never contain, the beautiful, unpredictable constant in our lives. She was our everything, the very foundation upon which our quiet, calculated world was built. The home video sharpened, growing more recent and clear. We see Lily, now 16, strumming a guitar with a focused intensity. Then, a shot of David, in his 40s, his kind eyes crinkling as he works. He is fixing her bike, a simple, loving act captured on film. David's smile for the camera never reached his eyes, a hollow, practiced gesture that left his gaze cold and detached. Sarah, in voiceover, would later recall he was a devoted father, perhaps obsessively so overprotective to a fault. He'd slip into dark moods if Lily was even a few minutes late, his demeanor shifting without warning. The air in the house would grow heavy then, thick with a tension you could almost taste, metallic and sharp. He'd claim it was only love, only concern. I trusted him. You trust the man whose warmth you've shared for 20 years. Then the warm filter vanished. The air grew heavy with the scent of stale ozone. A damp chill seeped through the sheets. From the hallway, a faint, rhythmic scratching began. Rain slashed the suburban street, police cruiser lights smearing crimson across the wet asphalt. The house stood cordoned behind the tape, windows dark like empty eye sockets. Lily vanished that Tuesday after soccer practice, her backpack found abandoned by the old creek. For 3 endless days, our world shrank to search parties and the static hum of news bands. David just shut down. His movements became stiff, mechanical, like a machine winding down. He fell into a heavy silence that felt thick in the air, broken only by the faint, rhythmic drip of a leak somewhere. I mistook it for grief. Thought his heart, like mine, had simply shattered into too many jagged pieces to form waves. But the air carried a faint, metallic scent, and his stillness felt less like sorrow and more like a dreadful, waiting hush. Evidence emerged from the investigation. A partial fingerprint on her phone, a solitary clue in a vacuum of answers. Sarah paced the sterile interview room, each step echoing off the linoleum, while David sat motionless, his gaze fixed on his own clasped hands. The air carried the faint scent of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, a clinical smell that did nothing to dispel the growing dread. This single, incomplete print became an anchor in the void, a tangible thread in a case that was rapidly unraveling in the darkness. Near the creek's edge, they found fibers from an uncommon work well. The damp air carried the scent of wet earth and something faintly chemical. They questioned David first, of course. Families are always the initial focus when darkness touches a home. His alibi was thin, working late, alone in his home office, with no one to verify. David sat across from him, mechanically spooning soup, his movements devoid of any warmth or connection. Sarah watched him, the air between them thickening with an unspoken tension. At home, a strange, cold distance began to grow, palpable and unsettling. When he looked at Lily's photos, his expression held more than grief. It was the focused intensity of a man working through a puzzle. One night, I woke to an empty bed, the sheets cold beside me. I found him standing motionless in Lily's room, swallowed by the darkness. The air carried the faint scent of old paper and dust, and his stillness felt heavier than the night itself. Sarah's voice was a ghost in the room. "David?" she whispered, her breath catching in the cold air. Without turning, David's voice cut through the stillness. Did she ever talk about being afraid of someone who looked like me? On screen, Sarah's face froze. The confusion, a tangible thing in a damp, quiet space. In voiceover, her thoughts unraveled. It was the most unsettling thing he'd ever uttered. I had to ask him what he meant. He just shook his head and said nothing. A nightmare. But the seed was planted. In the attic, Sarah quietly sifted through a box of David's old belongings. The air smelled of aged paper and forgotten memories, thick with dust that clung to her fingers. Then her fingers brushed against something different. A sealed envelope, crisp and untouched by time. Inside, I found a single, faded photograph of two identical boys, around 10 years old. One boy offered a wide, innocent smile. The other's face had been violently scribbled out with a thick, black marker. And that's when the first crack appeared in the story, because Sarah's voiceover revealed a chilling contradiction. David was supposed to be an only child. That was the story I'd been told, the one his parents solemnly repeated at our wedding. But in the attic, beneath layers of dusty holiday decorations, I uncovered a different truth. The air was thick with the scent of mothballs and something faintly metallic. And there, nestled in yellow papers, was a name that changed everything. Daniel, his twin brother. Given up for adoption at birth after unsettling incidents, David's family erased him completely. Sarah confronts him, the photo trembling in her hand. His reaction isn't shock, but a profound, weary resignation. David, where did you find that? The words hang in the cold, still air. Sarah, who is he, David? Her voice is a sharp whisper, cutting through the quiet. The question hung in the damp air, heavy with the scent of wet earth and something metallic, like old iron. David's voice was flat, a hollow echo against the steady drip of water from a leak somewhere in the dark. He's gone. The words were final, spoken not with grief, but with a quiet, unsettling certainty. He's been gone. It's not relevant. The dismissal was absolute, a door slamming shut on the past, leaving only the sticky, cold dread of the present. Sarah's scream tore through the house, raw and ragged. Not relevant? Our daughter is dead. Outside, the storm answered with fury, wind howling like a wounded animal against the old walls. The air inside grew thick with the scent of ozone and something else, a faint metallic tang like old pennies. This was the moment everything fractured. The fragile piece of before shattered into sharp, irreversible pieces. Sarah sat motionless in the dark living room, the photograph clutched in her trembling hands. The metallic click of the lock broke the stillness, followed by the groan of the front door swinging open. David stood there, water dripping from his coat, but his stance was rigid and unfamiliar. The air grew heavy with the scent of wet earth and something faintly coppery. His eyes met hers, and she noticed they were a different shade of the same blue. Sarah's voice wavered as she spoke his name, the air suddenly tasting of ozone and iron. He walked past her into the kitchen, his wet footprints leaving damp trails on the floorboards. The sticky residue from his shoes seemed to absorb all sound, leaving only the whisper of his movements. He opened the refrigerator, then took a long swig of orange juice straight from the carton. The thing David never did. The man wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. Long drive, he said, his voice rough from the road. Sarah stood up, the air suddenly thick and metallic, like the scent before a storm, her body locked rigid. That voice, she knew it, but the cadence felt wrong, flat, a subtly off-key mimicry. Sarah's voice cut through the heavy air. Where were you? The man turned slowly, leaning his weight against the counter with a deliberate, almost rehearsed motion. His reply came, tinged with the scent of damp earth and old iron. Had to see some old fonts. The creek path was a ribbon of solitude, made tranquil by the steady fall of rain. Suddenly, Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her breath catching sharply in her throat. She stumbled back, her boots slipping on the slick, leaf-strewn mud. Her voice, when it finally came, was a raw whisper that cut through the patter of the downpour. You're not David. The man stepped into the dim light, his expression a vacant, deliberate smile that never touched his eyes. Took you long enough, Sarah, he said, his voice a dry rasp that carried the faint scent of ozone and old dust. He said you were the smart one. The words hung in the frigid, damp air, each syllable a deliberate weight. Recognition dawned with a suffocating finality. It was him, but this wasn't David. A faint scar traced above his eyebrow where David had none. The warmth that usually softened David's gaze was gone, replaced by a hollow, chilling stillness. A faint, metallic scent hung in the air, like old coins left in the rain. Then he spoke, his voice a dry whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I'm Daniel, he said. The ghost, the problem they sent away. Sarah's voice trembled, barely a whisper. Where is my husband? Daniel's reply came not from the darkness, but from the very air around her, his tone unnervingly casual. Oh, he's around. The words hung in the thick, ozone-scented air. Always has been. He was always watching, letting me visit, the big brother, looking out for his troubled twin. He felt guilty, you see. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth and old sorrow, for having the light, the wife, The daughter. That should have been mine. Daniel moved closer, his footsteps silent on the damp floorboards. Sarah felt the air thicken around her, her muscles locking in place. He leaned in, his breath smelling faintly of ozone and old paper. I liked watching Lily. She looked like that. The words hung in the stagnant air, a cold dread seeping into Sarah's bones. But she possessed your vibrant spirit, so full of life. David knew I was observing her, that I couldn't look away.
The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and ozone. Then he told me, his voice a low rasp, to stop. Yet he never halted me, never summoned the authorities. It was his secret to keep, his private disgrace. The metallic scent of old pipes and damp earth clung to the silence. A deep, gnawing shame held him motionless, as palpable as the chill on his skin.
Sarah's voice was a threadbare whisper, frayed with dread. What did you do? Daniel's mocking smirk dissolved, warping into something petulant and unhinged. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. She saw me, he uttered, the words sticky with confession. That day, on the trail, she whispered, Dad, what are you doing here? Her eyes narrowed, and recognition dawned. A cold, certain knowledge. You're not my dad, she breathed, the words hanging in the damp, stagnant air like a curse. A primal dread took hold as she turned, her breath hitching. She was going to tell you. The only sound was the faint drip of water somewhere distant, and the sticky scent of ozone clinging to the room. She was going to ruin everything, the last little piece of my brother I had left. Sarah's world collapsed inward, a silent, suffocating implosion. Then Daniel's voice cut through the stagnant air, thick with the scent of damp earth and old grief. David found out, he whispered, the words sticking in the damp silence. He's been managing you. He's cleaning up, but the guilt consumes him from within. It gnaws at his soul. A relentless and corrosive weight. That's why he sent me here. To tell you, the air smells of damp earth and something metallic, like old pennies. Sarah's voice cracked, raw with desperation, as she demanded, Where is he? Daniel's reply was a low, measured whisper that seemed to absorb the light in the room, waiting. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, like old pennies. He wants you to choose, Daniel finished, the final word hanging in the stagnant silence. Daniel's phone screen glowed, illuminating a live feed from a dim garage. David was bound to a chair, his silhouette slumped in the damp, stagnant air. The metallic scent of rust and old motor oil clung to the space.
Then Daniel's voice, unnervingly gentle, cut through the quiet. He says he failed you both.
He insists he deserves punishment. So here's your choice, Sarah. Call the police right now.
Tell them everything.
The air in the room grew thick, with the scent of damp earth and something metallic. Her breath hitched, caught between the weight of his confession and the cold reality of the receiver in her hand. The coming corner. But I've wired that garage. When the police arrive, he'll burn. His final act will be that of a grieving father, consumed by guilt. The air grows thick, with the scent of iron and impending fire. Or, he leans in, the scent of stale sweat and something metallic filling the narrow space between them. His whisper was a cold blade against her ear. You let me walk out of here, I disappear forever. And your husband comes home to you, a broken man but your man. You keep your secret, we keep ours. Just a tragic, unsolved crime, a family that fell apart. Sarah's gaze shifted from the phone displaying her husband's betrayal to the man who'd taken her daughter's life. Her voice emerged steady and cold, like winter air in a tomb. You don't get to give me choices. The air grew thick with ozone and the iron scent of impending violence. Then, in one fluid, devastating motion, she brought the vase crashing down upon Daniel's skull. His body crumpled to the floor without a sound. She didn't scream, just knelt in the growing silence, the air thick with the metallic scent of iron. Her cold fingers closed around the device, its screen casting a sickly glow across her face. She lifted it slowly, her voice a low whisper into the receiver. I see you, David. She sees them both now. The phone clatters from her hand, its plastic casing striking the wooden floor with a hollow crack. Her bare feet carry her toward the landline, each step echoing through the house's oppressive stillness. Her fingers, cold and trembling, close around the heavy receiver.
The camera holds on her profile, illuminated by a flash of lightning. Sarah, I'd like to report a murder and a kidnapping.
She pauses, listening.
A single, fractured sob escapes her.
Sarah. My name is Sarah Miller. The suspects are my husband, David Miller, and his twin brother, Daniel. Sarah. The police found David in a storage locker 20 miles away. He'd left the door unlocked. He told me he was waiting for my decision. They say Daniel will never stand trial for what he did. The blow I struck left him hollow, a shell breathing by machine. So sometimes, I visit. The air grows thick with the smell of iron and regret. I sit by his hospital bed, watching the face of the man I love, the face of the man who shattered me. The air carries the sterile scent of antiseptic, mixed with something metallic, like old copper. And I whisper it again, the same question, into the cold, heavy silence. Which one of us was the monster? Or were we just two halves of the same terrible whole that were hung in the air, final and absolute, like a sentence passed? A sharp, metallic tang, the scent of ozone, suddenly cut through the stale library air, replacing the comforting smell of old paper. The temperature plunged, a damp, invasive cold that seeped through clothing and settled deep in the bones. From somewhere in the room's profound stillness came a new sound. The faint, wet scratch of a single fingernail dragging slowly across wood.
Curious? Subscribe and step through the next anomaly.